her prince. Once long ago, the wicked fairy Maleficent put a spell on the young Princess Aurora. She was doomed to sleep for 100 years, but the spell could be broken. A kiss from the man who truly loved her would wake her from this sleeping death. To try and keep the young princess safe from Maleficent, her 3 fairy godmothers, Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather, had brought her up in the forest as a peasant girl. They called her Briar Rose. On her 16th birthday, she met and fell in love with the handsome Prince Philip. But he had no idea that his Briar Rose was, in fact, a royal princess. If only the 3 fairies could reach the prince before Maleficent, for he alone could break the spell with a kiss. At that very moment, the prince was riding deep into the forest. He pulled his horse to a halt and looked about the peaceful glade. There it was, the woodcutter's cottage, and inside, Briar Rose would be waiting. The prince galloped towards the cottage, dismounted, and strode to the door. Smiling for joy, he threw the door open and walked in. It was not the welcoming voice of Briar Rose that greeted him, but the blood-curdling cackle of Maleficent. Before he could draw his sword, the young prince was set upon by a band of ugly demons, servants of the wicked fairy. The young man put up a good fight, but he was heavily outnumbered and soon overpowered. Kicking and struggling, he was dragged from the cottage, Maleficent's evil laughter still ringing in his ears. "Take him to my castle!" Maleficent screamed at her servants. "And guard him well! It's not often we have a royal visitor!" But soon the woodcutter's cottage had other visitors. The 3 good fairies, Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather. Flora picked up the prince's hat, and they looked at the upturned tables and chairs. "Oh, no," cried Flora. "Maleficent must have got here first. Well, there's nothing else for it. We'll just have to get into that castle of hers." In a trice they appeared outside Maleficent's castle, built high on the craggy peak of the Forbidden Mountain. It was an awesome sight, and well protected from unwelcome visitors. But making themselves as tiny as mice, the 3 fairies managed to creep through a chink in the door. Down they went into the dark depths of the castle, until at last they found the dungeon where the prince was held. Maleficent was inside, and her evil henchmen guarded the door. Prince Philip was chained, hand and foot.
"Why so glum, dear prince?" said Maleficent spitefully. "Let me show you a sight to enjoy."
And with that the wicked fairy conjured up a vision of a beautiful princess asleep in the royal palace.
"Poor prince,"
Maleficent went on.
"In love with a sleeping beauty. Your Princess Aurora is doomed to sleep for 100 years.
The prince gasped. It was his own dear Briar Rose. So she was the Princess Aurora. Then, with a mighty clank of the dungeon door, Maleficent was gone. At once, the 3 good fairies crept out from their hiding places, and with a wave of their magic wands, the prince was free.
"You are the only one who can lift the spell on the princess,"
they whispered urgently.
"But Maleficent will use all the evil at her command to stop you. You must be armed. It's your only hope."
Combining all their powers, the good fairies provided him with a magic shield of truth and the sword of justice. At the castle door stood his faithful horse Samson. Armed with his new weapons, the brave prince swung on his back and galloped away. Meanwhile, the evil Maleficent was seated in her tower, gloating over her triumphs to her pet raven. In fury, she spied the prince escaping. "Raise the drawbridge!" she shrieked at the guards. But she was too late. The prince's horse made a mighty leap and cleared the yawning chasm below. She sent lightning to blister the trees around him, and rocks showered down in his path. But with his shield of truth to protect him, the prince rode on. "You won't escape me!" screamed Maleficent, and using all her cunning, she made a great forest of brambles rise up to entrap the prince. He was hemmed in by sharp thorns, which jabbed at his skin whichever way he turned. But he drew his sword of justice to cut his way through, and at its magic touch, the dense tangles parted and he was freed. He galloped as fast as he could towards the palace, where Princess Aurora lay in a deep sleep. Maleficent was desperate to stop the prince. Just as he reached the bridge to the palace, she summoned up a great roaring wind, and in its midst she turned herself into a huge and hideous dragon. It was to be a fight to the death. The dreadful dragon barred the prince's way, and at the sight of it Samson reared and flung his master to the ground, scattering the precious weapons. The prince scrambled to his feet, and dodging the dragon's fiery breath, he managed to retrieve his sword and shield. But at that moment, the bridge he was standing on crumbled away, and he found himself on the edge of a yawning abyss. As the prince raised his shield, the dragon leapt forward. It was almost upon him, and everything seemed lost. But the good fairies had not deserted Prince Philip. As he raised his sword in a last effort, the fairies blew magic dust onto the blade and chanted, "Now, sword of justice, fly swift and sure, that evil die and good endure." And with that, Philip hurled the sword at the dragon's throat. The blade plunged deep into the monster's neck, and with a dreadful spine-chilling howl, it toppled to its death. Maleficent was no more. But the prince did not rest. At once he set out to search for his princess. It was still and quiet as death as he passed through each room to find her. Until Aurora woke, the whole palace was to lie asleep. But there at last he saw his sleeping beauty. Just as had been foretold, he woke her with a tender kiss, and as her eyes opened, all around them the palace came to life as well. It was as if nothing had happened, and although everyone felt a little sleepy, they had no idea why. The king and queen came forward to meet their beautiful daughter, just as they had planned. And to the great joy of everyone throughout the kingdom, Princess Aurora was that night betrothed to her beloved prince. The kingdom was rid of the wicked Maleficent once and for all. And from that day on, they all lived in peace and contentment.
Pooh, the Polar Bear. One afternoon, Eeyore was standing in his favourite place near the stream when he heard Pooh and Tigger and Piglet calling him.
"Hello, Eeyore!"
Cried Tigger.
"Is this where Christopher Robin keeps his new punt?"
"The one he said has a picnic hamper in it," explained Piglet. "With honey for tea, pom-pom," said Pooh, pom-pomming some more. Eeyore looked round slowly. "It might be," he said.
"Where is it? Where is it?"
cried Tigger. "Try the stream," said Eeyore, turning back to the wet meadow again. "Stream?" said Pooh. "Stream, pom-pom?" Tigger bounced to the stream. A whole family of ducks looked up at him from a little squarish sort of boat.
"This must be it," he said. "Piglet, Pooh, it's a boat, but I've never heard a boat being called a punt before."
"It's just as good a name as any," declared Pooh. "There's a picnic hamper in it," cried Piglet. "Pom-pom," sang Pooh. "Honey and pom-pom-pom."
"And ducks in it too,"
said Tigger. Pooh plopped into the boat. "And a long pole," he said.
"What's the pole for?"
asked Tigger from the bank.
Tell us,
said Piglet beside him. Pooh laughed. "I may be a bear of little brain, but I know what a pole is for." "Quack?" asked the ducks, who had less brain than Pooh. "It's a pole for a bear," cried Pooh. "What sort of bear?" called Piglet. Pooh gave the pole a good hard push into the water. "Why, a polar bear," he cried, and the punt sailed out into the middle of the stream. "Christopher Robin will have something to say about that," said Eeyore gloomily.
"Come back!" cried Tigger and Piglet.
Pooh, come back!
"Quack, quack!"
cried the ducks, and they jumped off the punt. "How kind of Christopher Robin to arrange a picnic on a punt," said Pooh, jabbing the pole once more into the water. But he pushed so hard, the pole stuck in the mud at the bottom of the stream, and Pooh was left clinging to the pole as the punt slid away from beneath him.
"Pooh is stranded!" yelled Tigger.
Pooh is shipwrecked!
cried Piglet. "Pooh," said Pooh gloomily as he clung on to the pole, "is pole-wrecked, and if help doesn't come soon, Pooh will be a very wet bear."
"Save Pooh!"
yelled Tigger.
Get help!
Squealed Piglet, and they both rushed away to find someone who could help Pooh. They moved off so quickly that they forgot all about Eeyore, who had quietly started to plod his way downstream. Tigger and Piglet looked for Rabbit first, for Rabbit always had a good plan. But Rabbit was away, visiting some of his relations, so Tigger and Piglet looked for Kanga and Roo. But they were nowhere to be seen, so at last they decided to see if Owl could help.
"Owl, wake up!"
cried Tigger, banging on his door.
"Poor Pooh is up a pole, and he's slipping down fast."
Oh, he is,
Squealed Piglet. Is he, said Owl, blinking in the sunlight. "I knew it," he declared, for Owl knew almost everything. "But though my sleep has been disturbed, I shall produce a practical plan." "Oh, come on!" cried Piglet, for Owl would talk so. Meanwhile, Pooh, who was becoming rather gloomy, had decided to make up a brave song to keep himself cheerful. "How brave of me," he sighed.
Quack!
asked the ducks, meaning what was so brave about being in the water, for they were in it all day long. And he was just wondering how to begin his song when the others returned with Owl.
"Hello, Pooh! We've brought Owl!" cried Tigger. "We couldn't find anyone else, but he's thinking of a practical plan to save you."
"So I am," said Owl. "Well, don't be too long about it," said Pooh. "Bears can't hang on to poles forever, not even polar bears."
"Tell us the plan, Owl!"
cried Tigger. But Owl wasn't ready yet. "We can't rush into important matters like bears up poles," he said. "Pooh must be patient." "How, Owl?" cried Pooh. "I'm slipping too much to be patient." "Then be brave," said Owl. "I am brave," cried Pooh. "I've just made up a song about how I came to be a polar bear. Isn't that brave?"
Sing it, Pooh!
encouraged Piglet.
Quack, quack, quack!
added the ducks, who wanted to join in the song. So Pooh clung to the pole and sang his song. "I'm a bear who's been left up a pole.
Quack!
I'm a bear who's now sliding down a pole.
Quack, quack!
If I slip down, I'll get
Quack!
remarkably wet. As wet as any bear ever got."
Quack, quack, quack!
Now, Pooh would have gone on with several more verses of this song, for he was enjoying it, even though it was a gloomy song, and the ducks were enjoying it, and Piglet and Tigger were enjoying it. And Owl, too, was enjoying it. Owl was enjoying it so much, in fact, that he'd stopped trying to think of a practical plan for rescuing Pooh. But someone else joined in with a new verse. "And if you look round, you'll see old Eeyore and me, and Bear can have honey for tea." Everyone looked round. It was Christopher Robin in the punt, and Eeyore was pulling the punt on a bit of frayed rope.
Eeyore went for Christopher Robin!
Squeaked Piglet.
"Eeyore pulled the punt back!"
Cried Tigger. "I knew it all the time," declared Owl, as the punt slid back to where it should be, underneath Pooh. And Pooh plopped down beside the picnic hamper to a noisy chorus of quacks from the ducks. The others clambered aboard in great excitement, and the punt travelled slowly downstream with Christopher Robin in control. Feeling very relieved, Pooh turned his thoughts to the picnic hamper and honey, lots of it, for tea.
Pluto's Pigeon Pie. Pluto was listening to Minnie and Daisy as they chatted about new recipes. When Minnie started to tell Daisy about a delicious pigeon pie she'd made, Pluto pricked up his ears. "Oh, that sounds good," he thought, and his mouth started to water. "You need 3 plump pigeons," Minnie said to Daisy. But Pluto didn't wait to hear any more. "Oh, pigeons," he thought as he bounded into the garden. "Didn't I see some of those in the tree this morning?" Sure enough, the pigeons were still there. Pluto sat and watched them, his tongue hanging out. Suddenly, one of the pigeons flew down and pecked at a long worm in the flower bed, then flew back to the tree again. "Aha!" Pluto thought. "So pigeons like to eat worms, do they?" He trotted indoors, found a long piece of string, and took it into the garden. Then he arranged it carefully between 2 clumps of flowers, hoping it would look like a nice, tasty worm. Still clutching one end of the string, Pluto hid behind a bush and jiggled the string up and down to make it wriggle. He would jump on the first pigeon that flew down to get the worm. Pluto licked his lips in anticipation. Meanwhile, up in the tree, one of the pigeons did see what looked like a nice, juicy worm wriggling near the bushes below. He flew down and pecked hard at it. "Wow!" howled Pluto. "My tail!" He shot out from behind the bush with the pigeon pecking fiercely at his skinny tail. Minnie had been watching Pluto from the window, and out she ran to shoo away the pigeon. "Pluto!" she scolded. "You weren't trying to catch a pigeon, were you?" Pluto hung his head. "Oh, well, never mind," said Minnie, and she started to laugh. "I think the pigeon caught you instead." Donald joins the army. When Donald Duck's nephews told him they were going to an army camp, Donald was delighted. "I'll come too," he exclaimed. "I've always wanted to be a soldier." "Oh, you're too old," said the triplets. But on parade the first day, Donald certainly looked the part. Their first task was to get round an obstacle course in 10 minutes. Donald was enjoying himself until he had to swing over the river on a rope. Disaster struck. He caught hold of the rope too low down and was dragged spluttering and gasping through the water. Getting back over the river was even worse. His only route was a slippery pole suspended above the water. Clinging desperately to the underside, he inched his way over the rushing water. Just then he heard the triplets cry, "Watch out, Uncle Donald!" and they thundered across the pole, trampling on his fingers. Splash! Donald got another nasty ducking in the cold river. Wet and dripping, Donald scrambled through a row of barrels quite safely, but when he had to dive through the tire at the other end, his buttons got caught and he was stuck fast. Huey, Louie and Dewey pushed and pulled, and with a mighty rip, Donald burst free. His once smart jacket now in a sorry state, Donald started to haul himself over the next obstacle, a very high wall, when he heard the Sergeant Major bark, "Time's up! Pack the base! Pitch tents! Catch yourself fish! Light a fire! And cook it!" Now for the easy part, thought Donald, pulling the tent from its bag. But by the time the others were ready to go fishing, Donald was only half finished, and his tent was in a terrible mess. Just as he stepped back to admire his handiwork, the Sergeant Major appeared. "Is this it then, Duck?" he screamed at Donald. "Well, it's inside out! Start again!" Donald groaned. With muscles aching, Donald put up his tent again and made a fishing rod and line. Dejectedly, he sat on the riverbank to catch his supper. But by then the fish had grown tired of being caught and had gone into hiding. All Donald could catch was a tiddler, and he was ravenous. Back at the camp, Huey, Louie and Dewey were sitting round a glowing fire, looking well-fed and contented. "All the rest of the food is gone, Uncle Donald. You'll have to make do with your fish," they giggled. Donald pretended not to hear, and went to gather some tinder. but he could only find a few spindly twigs. Never mind, he told himself, finding a match. It's only a spindly little fish anyway. Just as he struck the match, the triplets came up behind him. "Uncle Donald, you're not supposed to use matches," they chorused. Donald jumped and the match burned his fingers. He let out a mighty "Ow!" Too tired to worry about the fire anymore, or his rumbling stomach, Donald crawled into his sleeping bag. But he couldn't get comfortable. He seemed to be lying on a bed of rocks, all of them sticking in his back. After tossing and turning for as long as his aching bones would allow, Donald gave up. Stealthily, he crept from his tent and hurried away down the road to the nearest town. There, he booked into the first hotel he found. After a long hot bath and a very large dinner, Donald snuggled down in bed, feeling content at last. "Perhaps I am a bit too old to be a soldier," he admitted drowsily. "Maybe I'm better suited to being a concert pianist, or an artist, or..." But the next minute, he was sound asleep.
Dumbo the Elephant, Part 3. Dumbo said goodbye to his mother after visiting her in the cage where she'd been locked up away from the rest of the circus. Tears rolled down his trunk as he walked back to the big tent with Tim the mouse. It was bad enough being parted from his mother, but to make matters worse, they had made him a clown in the circus, and he really hated being laughed at all the time.
"Come on, Dumbo, pull yourself together," urged Tim. "What would your mother think of you if she saw you crying like that?"
Dumbo sniffed and tried very hard to be brave, but as soon as he stopped crying, he got a fit of the hiccups.
"Oh dear, you are in a bad way," said Tim, shaking his head from side to side. "Goodness knows what would happen to you if you didn't have me to look after you."
Dumbo looked down at the tiny mouse and smiled between hiccups. He was very grateful for his little friend who had been so good to him. Meanwhile, back in the big tent, the clowns were celebrating the success of their new act with champagne. The sequence with Dumbo jumping from a burning tower into a tub of plaster had been so popular with the audience that now the clowns wanted to make it even more dangerous and exciting.
"If the people laugh when he jumps 20 feet, they'll laugh even more if he jumps 40 feet, said one. "Make it 100 feet. Why not 1,000 feet, said another. "Oh, no," said the third clown. "The little fellow will get hurt." "Don't be silly," laughed the fourth clown. "Elephants don't have any feelings." "Of course they don't," agreed the fifth clown. "The act will be a sensation. Let's go and tell the ringmaster." "Yes, let's go," chorused the clowns. And in the rush, one of them knocked a bottle of champagne on its side, and it started dripping into a bucket of water below. When Dumbo and Tim entered the big tent, Dumbo was still hiccuping, and Tim spotted the bucket. "Come on, Dumbo, have a drink," said Tim. "Water's very good for hiccups." Dumbo slurped up a big trunkful of the water. "Tastes very nice," he said, and gulped some more. "Well, I'm a bit thirsty myself," said Tim, taking a drink. "Yes, you're right. What delicious water."
"Yum, it's good," sighed Dumbo. Then he gave a great big hiccup, and hundreds of pretty yellow bubbles burst out of his trunk and floated round the tent.
"Hey, look at that!" cried Tim. "I think it's magic water. Let's drink some more of it."
Very soon the two of them were reeling about, laughing and blowing bubbles which seemed to turn into huge pink elephants. Of course, Dumbo and Tim didn't realise that they'd been drinking champagne mixed with the water, and they were very drunk indeed. They soon fell fast asleep, and the next morning They couldn't remember a single thing about what they'd been doing. Tim woke up first and was surprised to see that they were surrounded by a flock of crows. "Go away, you birds," he yawned sleepily. "Get back up into the trees where you belong." "Are you crazy?" said one of the crows rudely. "We are up in a tree, and so are you." "Don't be stupid," scoffed Tim. "How could we be? Oh, help, help!" He jumped with shock and prodded Dumbo. "Wake up, Dumbo, wake up! Don't look now, but we're up in a tree." Dumbo opened his eyes to find himself lying across a branch high up in the sky. And when he looked down, he got so dizzy that he just rolled over and fell off, dragging Tim with him. The crows peered down from the tree in amazement as they watched the elephant and the mouse tumbling through the air into a pool of water below. Then the curious birds flew down to gape at Dumbo and Tim. As they walked away, Tim suddenly stopped and looked back at the tall tree they'd fallen out of. "Wait a minute, Dumbo. How did we get there in the first place?" "I don't know," said Dumbo. "We must have climbed up." "No, we couldn't have climbed," said Tim. "Well, maybe we jumped," Dumbo suggested. "No, impossible," said Tim, scratching his head in a puzzled way. Then he suddenly raised his eyebrows in astonishment as a thought struck him. "I know! We flew! You can fly, Dumbo!" The crows started to hop about and cackle with laughter, while Dumbo looked at them reproachfully. They jeered. "Whoever heard of a flying elephant? How funny! What a joke!" "Be quiet!" shouted Tim, who was just about sick and tired of people laughing at Dumbo and upsetting him. "You ought to be ashamed of yourselves, picking on a poor little orphan like him." The crows stopped laughing and gathered round to listen to Tim. "Just because he's got those big ears, they call him a freak and laugh at him. And then, when his mother tried to protect him, they took her away and locked her up. How would you like to be torn away from your mother when you're only a baby and left all alone in this cold, cruel world?" The crows drew closer and looked sadly at Dumbo with tears in their eyes. "What's the use of talking to you heartless birds anyway?" Tim went on. "Come along, Dumbo, let's go." No, wait a minute, don't go," said Dandy Crow, who was the leader of the group. "We're very sorry we laughed at the poor little fellow." "It's too late to be sorry," Tim told him. "Oh, please wait," persisted Dandy Crow. "We can help him. We can teach him to fly." "Yes, we can teach him to fly," chorused the other crows. So Dumbo was led to a cliff top, where the birds instructed him how to fly. "It's easy, really," encouraged Dandy Crow. "If you hold this magic feather in your trunk, you simply can't go wrong." Dumbo took the feather, and the crow winked at Tim to let him know it was only a trick to make Dumbo feel more confident. "Are we ready?" asked Tim, who sat perched on Dumbo's head, waiting for the takeoff. "Ready, steady, go!" chorused the birds, giving Dumbo a push. Dumbo clutched the feather and flapped his ears, and suddenly he was flying. "You've done it! You've done it!" cried Tim as they soared and swooped through the air, with the crows following behind them. "Dumbo, you can really fly!" "He's even better than an
aeroplane!" exclaimed the delighted crows. "He flies like an eagle!" For Dumbo, it was the most wonderful moment of his life as he flew above trees and meadows, houses and telegraph poles, back to the circus. Soon, in the circus tent, it was nearly time for Dumbo's act to begin. He stood on the high burning tower with Tim balanced on his head, getting ready to jump.
"Hold on to the feather," grinned Tim. "They're really in for a surprise now."
There was a roll of drum beats from the musicians, and Dumbo jumped. But as he did so, he dropped the feather and plummeted down helplessly. The crowd screamed with horror. He was surely going to miss the safety net and fall to his death. "Dumbo!" yelled Tim.
"Fly, Dumbo!"
"I can't. I've dropped the magic feather," said the panic-stricken elephant as they continued to fall.
"It doesn't matter about that. It was only a joke,"
Tim told him urgently.
"You can fly without it. Just flap your ears."
"But," began Dumbo.
"Please," interrupted Tim, "quickly."
Dumbo flapped his ears, and immediately they started to rise up again. Then Dumbo flew, swooped and dived all around the circus tent. The crowd gasped in wonder and amazement. Matriarch and the other lady elephants who'd been so nasty to Dumbo cowered with fright, unable to believe their own eyes, and the ringmaster jumped for joy. When the show was over, he greeted Dumbo like a great star and told him he could have anything he wanted. "Could I have my mother back again, please?" asked the little elephant.
"Of course, Dumbo. I'll have her let out of her cage immediately."
So at last Dumbo was reunited with his mother. No one could laugh at his big ears now. He was famous, and people came from far and wide to see the incredible flying elephant. Mrs. Jumbo hugged her son joyfully. "Oh, I'm so proud of you, Dumbo," she said.
"And me too," chirped Tim. "Didn't I say you'd be a great star one day?"
Dumbo just smiled from one to the other of them. With his mother and his friend by his side, he was the happiest little elephant in the whole world. Ride a Cockhorse. Ride a Cockhorse to Banbury Cross to see a fine lady ride on a white horse. With rings on her fingers and bells on her toes, she shall have music wherever she goes.